You're recording this meeting. You sure? Let me know. Okay. I am to let you know you're being recorded.
I am aware.
Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Hi, everyone. I thought I would try to break up the monotony of listening to me talk for an hour each week a little bit. So today we have the pleasure of being joined by the author of one of the pieces that I had you look at for this week, Jacob Evoy. It is Evoy, right? I'm saying that correctly? Okay. Should have asked you before we started recording, but okay. So Jacob's piece is called "Aren't You Worried About What People Might Say, What People Might Do? Lady Gaga and the Healing of Queer Trauma." Of course, you've all read that by now. And in it, they speak to, among other things, some of the issues that we've been talking about in the course over the last couple of weeks, notably queer fandom and the idea of taking something from the popular culture that we consume and creating something of our own from it. You do a lot of other things with the piece as well, but that's kind of where we're coming at it from. So I'll introduce Jacob. Jacob Evoy is a PhD candidate completing a collaborative degree in gender, sexuality, and women's studies and transitional and post-conflict reconstruction. Their research examines queer experiences of intergenerational trauma through an oral history with LGBTQ plus children of Holocaust survivors. Jacob is also an instructor at Western and teaches the second-year gender and fashion course. When Jacob isn't working, they can be found playing video games such as Pokemon, Divinity Original Sin 2. That's one word, one name, right?
Yeah.
Showing my ignorance here and age perhaps as well. And World of Warcraft. Or hang out with their friends playing Dungeons and Dragons. I do know what that is. So, thank you so much.
Unite.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. It's been a while since I wrote that piece, so it's really nice to return to it and to see that it's being used. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. So just to recap, could you take us through kind of the before, during, and after of the concert? How did your friends respond to your outfit as you were leaving to go to the concert? This was written about, just to recap for them, a Lady Gaga performance that you saw in Toronto in 2011, was it?
Let's say 2013, I think.
2013.
Yeah. The other one I saw was 2011. Yeah.
2 shows. Okay. So, and how did that change as you and your friends inhabited particular spaces? The trip to the concert itself. So just kind of recap for them, for us, what was going on.
Yeah, so I'm just going to try and quickly share my screen here as well. Okay, there we go. Not that this really matters, but so all of this story kind of revolves around this pair of heels. It's like a 5-inch basic black stiletto, nothing really fancy, or at least nothing that I thought was all that out there. And so we had bought tickets. We were all living in London. There were 6 of us that went. All self-identified gay men. I believe almost everybody was born and raised in London or in southwestern Ontario, in between London and Windsor in some area. So none of us had really come from any major metropolitan centers, which I would consider Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, what have you. And so we had so we bought the tickets, and I had discussed, or I had mentioned that, oh, well, we've dressed up before when I have gone to see Lady Gaga before, and it was such a good time. So I had seen Gaga previously in 2011 for her Monster Ball tour. And so here you can kind of see what I wore for that day. So I tried to mimic one of the outfits she wore to the I think it was Much Music or MTV, awards. And so this is what I put together. This is what I wore. I did this was us kind of at the pre-drink before the going to the concert. So this was me first getting it on. I hadn't done my makeup or my hair yet, but anyways, so my friends had seen this because I had talked about it. It was we could all and everybody that went to this concert in Ottawa, we all kind of picked a different Gaga look or dressed up a bit. My friends were vehemently against any dressing up. I wasn't offended. I wasn't hurt by this. So, this is what I ended up wearing. Sorry for the bad picture. This was back when I had I think it was a BlackBerry, my very first and I didn't wear the toque, which I probably should have because it was in the middle of winter in Toronto. But so these were the two different outfits that I wore. So I decided to just wear a pair of high heels, skinny jeans, and this tank top, which now looking at it's like, why would this be my outfit to go to a Gaga concert? But that's what it was. So there were three of us in the car. We got to our hotel. We were the first ones to arrive. And I got a ride with Charlie, who's mentioned in the piece. And so we had checked in, and there had been a huge blizzard. So the drive to Toronto had been quite terrifying. So we were all already just relieved to be there, and just we were just concentrating on we have to get there and get there safely. We almost didn't go, but anyways, I just remember this so clearly. We got into the elevator and they asked well, what is everyone wearing? And I just said, tank, skinny jeans, as was the fashion at the time, and a pair of high heels. And it's clear as day in my head, their faces just dropped. You're wearing what? And then, kind of like I mentioned in the piece, all the questions started coming throughout as we were getting ready, getting set up in our room, getting other people arriving, primping and getting ourselves ready for this. The picture I showed you was not the final look of what I looked like. That was back taken in London before we had gone to Toronto or anything. Getting ready for a night out, because the plan was we're going to go to the concert and we're going to go straight from the concert then to the village. And the questions just kept coming. It's the middle of February. We just had a blizzard. Are you going to be able to walk in them? Can you dance in them? Isn't this going to hinder your ability to have fun at the concert? Are you going to be able to walk on the ice? And I was like, the subway is not even half a block from our hotel. I'm good. And then we're going to the Air Canada Centre, which the subway is attached to through an underground. So it was or it was another not even a full block walk from the subway station. So it was this isn't a big deal. What is happening here? And and Charlie then asked well, aren't you afraid of what people might say and what people might do? And I finally clued in. I was oh, they are scared of being associated with a presumed man wearing heels in public. Even though we were going to Lady Gaga, which I just found very peculiar. And, I didn't really think much of it. My response was just, no, I'm not. And maybe that was naive. Maybe that was just adrenaline of going to the concert. I am a lifelong Lady Gaga fan. I'm a little monster. So I was just so excited to go and see this show. And, I'd saved up for over half a year, to be able to afford this ticket. So this was a huge deal for me. And so we go, and as we're walking, only one person of the group would actually walk with me. And I'm not going to say that this is malicious, but that's the way it turned out. We all get, even with groups, he kind of just, but it was very peculiar that, they distanced themselves from me when we were walking to the subway, when we were on the subway, and until we actually got to the concert venue. And I only slipped once on the ice, but I caught myself. I didn't fall on the ground. But otherwise, I am very proficient in walking in heels. They're not an issue for me, even in winter. And we got to the concert, and they were fine, and we started to see a few more people dressed up. There weren't quite as many as I was expected for it to be Toronto. A lot more people dressed up in Ottawa when I went. But throughout the night, we all became more comfortable, and we were having some drinks, we were having a good time. You're caught up in the atmosphere of at the concert, and by the time the end of the concert, when we were going home, we were walking arm in arm. They had their arms very clear, I wouldn't say PDA necessarily, but very clearly like some affectionate, not straight touching as we're walking down the street. I'm not quite sure how else to describe it. Camaraderie down the street.
Yeah.
And so, and then the next day, Charlie, who had been so afraid, actually asked me in the hotel room to try on the shoes. And he fell on the bed the first time he tried. Took some getting used to find your balance, the way you hold yourself. And, they all kind of realized like, oh, this actually does a lot of good things for my legs and for my butt. These make me feel really sexy. And, we all took turns doing catwalks around the room. And like, so, within a span of 24 hours, my friends' reactions and attachments, or as Ahmed might say, shared orientation to the heels just had been completely transformed. And so at the end, Charlie had even said, I need to start practicing wearing heels so that, we're all going to wear heels for the next time we go to Gaga. That didn't end up happening, but, he has been trying, he did practice wearing heels. He has worn heels out a couple times. We just have never gone to a Gaga concert again together. So this very just kind of weird thing that happened within 24 hours that I was aware of in the moment, but it wasn't really until a few days later where I was like, that was so weird. What happened? And especially like, why are these gay men so afraid or so like anxious of what's so weird about a gay man wearing heels? Like we go to drag shows all the time. This is not the first time that I wear heels. Like it was a very strange phenomenon. So I guess that's kind of the story. So I'll end it there.
Yeah, no, and you covered that just perfectly. You've even covered so many other questions, which is great. But I mean, you talk about how you saw your friends as internalizing, a form of shame regarding, as you write in the piece, something that a gay man is not meant to be/do, while simultaneously preparing to attend a concert that celebrated the very breaking of the norms they were ashamed of and feared. Why do you feel this is the case? Why might it still not be, safe to break such norms in such a space? The Air Canada Centre, was it? Temporarily for that evening at least, devoted to destroying those norms. So why is that?
And I mean, this is a conversation that, that we had a lot last year in last term with my course for gender and fashion. For one thing, Gaga, this is also earlier Gaga, slightly earlier Gaga,
Right.
where Gaga is still a fashion icon. But, especially early in her career, Gaga was doing like some hard drag every time she stepped out of her home. And so, the expectation was that this is going to continue at the concert and this is going to be seen by concert participants. But, and I think this is something that many queer people deal with. We all deal with internalized shame. And I'm not trying to say that, I'm a better gay than what they are because I do this. That's not the point of this. But because, even I have that internalized shame that still crops up even so many years later. So I think that there's a disconnect between, when we see it being done in the media or by Gaga, or like you see her concerts in a YouTube video, or at this time, for us, Facebook was still the really popular thing. It's different than when it's all of a sudden you and your body that is then being on display, and that is then the subject of ridicule or might be positioned or associated with that non-normative body. And the people that I went with, they made up a very kind of unique, or not unique. Some of them on their Grindr profile at the time identified as straight acting.
Right.
So these are the type of people that I went with, we have that internalized shame of that, that just because we're gay doesn't mean that we aren't men and that we can still be masculine. And some of my friends really subscribed to that and really relied on their masculinity and their athleticism and their muscles to show that they are still actually men. I think part of this is also our cultural upbringing of, growing up in Southwestern Ontario. I know that it seems like 2013 wasn't too long ago, but a lot has still changed since then. I I don't think gay marriage in the States has been legalized yet, or maybe it was 2012.
2015 for the States, actually.
2015. So I mean 2005 here in Canada. But we also all are in London, which sorry London, but is a rather homophobic city. It's I'm now based in Montreal, and when I spend some time in London, when I go back to Montreal and we're driving home, I always do like, oh my gosh, there are gay people here. Like you can see them in the street, and we're not the only ones anymore. So I think that this is also about self-preservation.
Mhm.
So, for us who are coming from these small rural communities, to all of a sudden have this very obvious and outward display of our queerness, of our homosexuality, for us, all of our upbringing up to this point had always told us that is a way that you are putting yourself in danger, right? Like all through elementary school, high school, and even for many of us in university, to transgress the norms of straight masculinity puts you in danger of verbal and or physical abuse. All of which everybody that had attended this concert of my group of friends had all experienced in at least once throughout our lives. So I think that kind of creates this disconnect. We can emulate and want to and respect and celebrate a person like Gaga, who is doing these outlandish things, that is sending out these kind of empowering messages about, you're born this way, be who you are, celebrate your queerness. But that we can all support that, but then what that actually looks like then in our real lives and in our daily lives becomes something much different. When you actually have to embody that celebration or embody that queerness that you want to, that is always comes with risk. I'm kind of babbling now, so I don't even remember the original question, so I'm not sure if I answered it now.
Oh no, you totally covered it, and thank you. But we've been talking in this course about the sometimes contradictory ways in which certain artists affirm their relationship to and support their queer fans. Questions of authenticity and sincerity have come up over the years regarding people like Donna Summer, Madonna, Katy Perry, Nicki Minaj. What do you think about the particular relationship that Lady Gaga has to her queer fans? Is it different than other performers who have these these strong fan bases?
So, yes, and this may also be my own bias. So,
Sure.
but from my own experience, and one, it helps that Gaga is an out queer person. She is self-identified as bi. So that also makes a big difference, that this person isn't just queer baiting us, or isn't. She has a personal investment in the rights of queer people, and Gaga has always been and has recognized that queer people are the reason for her celebrity. They kind of gave this boost to her career that she first, well, and she's also very grateful to Canada, which she kind of says in all of her concerts that I've gone to. She made it to #1 in Canada first, which then made her more popular in the States, where more stations started playing her. But and I think that's something that really helped with Gaga, is that she's always been quite political. She's always been very vocal. Do I always agree with her politics? No. But she is still always, and I mean, at this period with Born This Way, this is still the height of the 21st century gay rights movement as we know it. The U.S. is still fighting for gay marriage, which was seen as the major struggle. Which I think maybe you've problematized a little bit in this class, or maybe have discussed. But anyways, so, Gaga actually being this international superstar and having someone that actually was willing and vocally supporting the queer community throughout her career. This wasn't oh yeah, I'm giving private donations. This was no, she was out front and very supportive and vocal. Even there was this one, I don't know if all of you will remember, but there was this one like major controversy where it was there was a rumor that maybe Gaga had a penis, and so like all these interviews that she would do, like, well, are you a hermaphrodite? Are you intersex? Well, they didn't use the term intersex because they didn't. The media is not aware of what that term is or was at that time. and her response was always just something like, well, what would it matter? You know, it was always a very challenging of these kind of heteronormative and cisnormative discourses that she found herself in. She always fought back against them. And that was something, so like she really, while that helped her career in many ways, especially given the time period, we would expect that to also very much hinder her career. So she was also willing to kind of take those risks, in my view, of her career to actually stand up for people. And, you know, Born This Way was kind of dedicated to queer people in many ways. So, you know, this was an entire album for the queer community almost. You know, that maybe this is me projecting or my own self projecting onto that. But, you know, this Born This Way anthem was all about that, about queer acceptance. I mean, this is still just at the ending peak of like the huge rise in queer youth suicides that was going on, right? So like this was part, you know, we have the It Gets Better project, we have the Human Rights Campaign. Really, they have been around by this point, but they're really starting to pick up steam and actually get a lot more attention. And Gaga, I think, is part of that movement. Right. So in some ways, I think maybe Gaga's devotion to queer people now could maybe may not her devotion, but her outward political affiliations might not be as prominent. But you know, she runs organizations for queer homeless youth. She is still doing quite a bit. So for me, there's something about that when we question authenticity, you know, she has always been a part of. She is literally a part of the queer community and has always stood up for the queer community, which I think. For many celebrities, they didn't realize how their music was being taken up by queer communities, or you know, when they kind of used the queer community as a way to make them seem edgy and trendy, without really reconciling or addressing how they did that in the past. You know, I'm thinking of I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It, or You're So Gay by Katy Perry, which, you know, when those came out, I absolutely loved and we're playing on repeat. But, you know, now that I actually think about what those were and what those songs are doing, they're somewhat problematic. So for me, Gaga has always just kind of had this investment in the queer community, has always recognized the queer community, and then has always fought for them. Quite vocally and powerfully. She doesn't only just do it in words, her actions have also backed these up. So that's kind of my biased take on Gaga.
Oh, absolutely, because we've been talking about in the over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the It Gets Better campaign, and we looked at some of the music that I don't want to say came out of that, because a lot of it was just sort of retroactively associated with it. Something like We Are Who We Are by Kesha, or some of these other stuff, Firework by Katy Perry. There's a sense that they were sort of retrofitted to be queer positive anthems with their music videos and with things like that in a way that they might not have been originally conceived of. And just reading my students' comments and everything on these discussions, there is the sense that, you know, Gaga is apart from that, even if she was at this, you know, around at the same time as all that. She has really kind of, you know, walked the walk, and, you know, with this. Obviously, she's not flawless, but, you know, she has very much made this part of her art and part of her celebrity and just part of her way of being in the world, right?
Exactly. And I mean, if you can show me a completely non-problematic person.
Oh, they don't exist.
Yeah, like they don't exist, right? So like there are things that Gaga has done, said that I disagree with, and there are political stances that she has that I don't agree with either. But, you know, to actually have somebody that it was vocally standing up, attending rallies, organizing rallies, organizing charities, getting queer homeless people off the street. That's huge. So you know, that's something where, yeah, there's something there, and there's just something about Gaga. Like, there are those actions, but I don't know, there's just something that when she is giving an interview, when she is talking about these things, that maybe she's just a really good actress. And I mean, maybe she's might be up for an Oscar right now too, and
Oh,
she's
that's
won a
right.
Golden Globe. So we know that she can't act, but like there's something about, that she actually feels and knows these experiences that she's talking about because she has lived them, or she has seen others, she has people in her life that has experienced these things. There's that there's something about that authenticity when she is speaking about them that makes me believe her. That
Yeah,
there are other celebrities where I'm just like, I like the sentiment. Thank you for saying it, but there's something
yeah,
not there.
right.
But anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So you read your experience of that evening through the lens of Anne Chekhovich. I hope I got that name right.
Spekovich.
Spekovich. Thank you. Through Spekovich's theories of trauma. So what do you think is the connection between trauma and queer performance? How did you come to understand Gaga's performance and your experience of that evening, in terms of trauma? Because it sounds pretty joyful. It sounds pretty awesome. So, where does trauma come into this?
Um, so I realized that Spekovich's piece was published in 2003, and that might seem very dated, almost 20 years now. But if you are interested in trauma studies, queer and feminist trauma studies, like I don't that book has been so monumental and has completely changed queer and feminist trauma studies.
And this is, sorry, this is an archive of feelings. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just
Um,
so
her,
if
her next book
you're
as
looking
well,
for.
Depression, is also incredible as well. But like an archive of feelings really um, reconceptualizes how we can understand and trauma. But anyways, how I came to view this through a lens of trauma was very just random. I was taking a graduate course on feminist interventions in trauma and testimony with Dr. Kim Verweyen, and the week before, no, the week before, or the week after I had attended the concert, uh, which was during reading week, we read Spekovich, and so Spekovich challenges our understandings of trauma in a few different ways. But when I read it, it was one of those things where someone puts the words to your experiences, and you're like, oh, this is what it was. Like, I had been thinking, like, what was happening at this concert? Like, there was something with my friends that just felt weird. How can I explain or unpack what that was? And she gave me that language. And so, when we think about trauma, and when we think about how trauma, the effects of trauma are seen or felt within, we kind of go stereotypical of, like, well, it has to be really upsetting, it has to be really depressing, and it has to be this kind of major outburst. But that's not how it always looks. There are certainly cases like that. And so what Spekovich is tracking is that, trauma doesn't make itself known through checking a list of symptoms. Trauma makes itself known through our everyday emotional lives and how we react to things, and that might not be a major, triggering reaction, but there are ways in which our everyday lives are influenced or informed by the traumas that we have experienced um, that we have experienced. And so, all of us, all queer people have experienced homophobia and transphobia. And if we haven't, those very, very few, if they exist, who haven't, uh, we are aware that we are always open to that possibility. And so that in itself can be traumatic and have traumatic effects. The way that we police ourselves, the way that we engage or will not go to certain spaces, it happens in a myriad of ways. And so in this case, all of my friends, and especially Charlie, who asked, well, aren't you afraid of what people might say and what people might do? It was because, well, a supposedly male body is not meant to wear heels. And therefore you're physically marking yourself as other, for other people to see. And we are then going out into a known homophobic public. And therefore you are putting yourself at risk. And so while that was not a traumatic, like I'm not saying Gaga was a traumatic event, it was a recognition and a recall of our past homophobia and experiences of homophobia and a past trauma that it can happen again. So how can we protect ourselves from that happening again? And so in this way, I was able to see like the emotional resonances of trauma and of homophobia, trauma related to homophobia in particular, taking place within this very joyous and kind of celebratory event. And then Sekvich also talks about that, you know, she challenges, I don't know if you read the footnotes, but this is one of the only footnote in my piece, you know, trauma scholars, they kind of have set up this dichotomy or this binary of there are good reactions to trauma and there are bad reactions to trauma. And so trauma scholars, especially at the time that she was writing, although this language still is quite prominent within trauma studies, you know, that people are working through trauma. And so one of the biggest and most celebrated or cited, whatever, prolific trauma scholars from especially the 90s and early 2000s, Dominic LaCapra, they kind of said, you know, there are reactions that are working through, which are kind of good ways of responding to trauma. And then there are the bad ways, you know, if you're responding in anger or frustration, that are acting up or acting out, you're acting out trauma. Which were positioned as something that was unhealthy, that is not leading to healing, that is not leading to any kind of positive. So Svekovich is actually, what she's saying is that, you know, no, we actually have to recognize that there are there are different ways that people can respond to trauma, and that we need to get rid of this good and bad emotional responses or ways of responding to one's trauma. And the fact that she also then shows that, you know, we don't have to be like, so Gaga creates what Svekovich talks about as a public culture of trauma. So Gaga isn't there to be like, we're all traumatized and we're all blah blah blah. We're not here to share our feelings about homophobia, transphobia, whatever. But what it is that, you know, with an anthem and an album like Born This Way, there is a recognition that we have all experienced or are aware of these types of traumas that are circulating within our community. And so all of us that are queer, that are there with that recognition and knowing. And so that we create what Svekovich calls a public culture of trauma, is that we are all coming around, we're creating a public or a group of people that we all have this connection about trauma, even though if this event isn't about trauma. And that we are then able to actually respond to this through acting up and through acting out in maybe ways that might not. So, you know, I was drinking, I was dancing, I was screaming, I was yelling, I was singing at the top of my lungs, which nobody should have to experience. You know, these kinds of things that might not normally be viewed within the field of trauma studies as appropriate responses to homophobia or to trauma. But we created a group within a space and we claimed that space, and we were able to then act up as a response to a recognition of the collective trauma that we all have experienced in the past. And that I kind of frame as, you know, that's waiting for us again outside as soon as we leave this one space. Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, that was okay. Incredible. Thank you. That's kind of the last thing I want to ask, because this is just something that sort of, it's not the focus of the piece, but it's just something that really just jumped out at me as I was reading it. I kind of appreciated, you know, you talk about, you know, your discomfort with having to attend your brother's hockey games as a child, and sport comes up a few times in the piece. You know, you're at the Air Canada Centre. You know, it's for this concert, so it's a sporting arena being temporarily transformed into what we might read as a queer space, given what performance it is. And then at the end of the piece, you say this thing where you're discussing your friend trying on the heels, and you say that, you know, once he made it successfully across the room, they would throw their arms up in the air as if they had scored a touchdown. So I really, was fascinated by the use of that language, that kind of language from football. So can you talk just a little bit about the binarism that you see as being at play between sport and queer performance? I don't know if this was even necessarily a conscious thing that you put into the piece, but
It is and it isn't. You know, I recognize kind of the irony of ending the piece with like us making the touchdown thing. But you know, that's just what it was. That's what happened. That's how we reacted to it, or my friends reacted to it. And you know, uh, I think it kind of comes. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, you froze on me for a second.
okay.
And I think this comes back to, you know, many of my earliest memories or first experiences with homophobia, although I didn't have that language when I was young, was experienced in sport centers. Was experienced at, you know, my brother's hockey games, that when he would play ball hockey in the summer, or at basketball, or in during gym class and stuff. Which I think maybe a lot of queer people, young queer people, can relate to. So, you know, for me, that kind of is kind of that traumatic resonance that has then comes forward through this piece. That, you know, that is the type of homophobia that we are aware of, and that's some of the first places where then, as young boys, we were very much disciplined by our peers, by adults, that, you know, there's a specific way for boys to act and to behave, and what you enjoy and what types of recreational activities you should like. You know, I was a dancer. I took dance when I was little, and I played with my sister's Barbies, but I hid my sister's Barbies under my bed. So, you know, so for me, you know, returning to the Air Canada Centre, which I had gone to a couple times before to see the Raptors. And you know, when you go to see a hockey game or a basketball game there, you're very aware of how straight that space is. I went to a Montreal Habs game. I'm based in Montreal. They have discounts for students. So, you know, I paid $30 and I got to go see a hockey game when my brother came to visit. There was, you know, even my brother was like, "This is probably the straightest night you've ever experienced in this city, coming to see an NHL hockey game and drinking tall boys." And so that for me is some of like the earliest experience I have of homophobia. So I'm returning to that space then, where this type of behavior of wearing heels, like if I wore heels to one of my brother's hockey games, that would, well, one, I would never have done that. But the reaction to that would have been bad, to say the least. But, you know, to then do that at the Air Canada Centre, and for me, actually recognizing what this space is normally used for, and how Gaga was able to transform it, for me was very meaningful and very powerful. And, you know, for my friends then at the hotel room, many of them are just sports fans as well. You know, that also falls under the kind of straight acting, is that, you know, you have to like football and you have to like sports. I'm not accusing those who like sports or bad people or yada yada, but you know, so that was just, you know, because almost everybody failed the first time they tried on the heels. And so maybe this is too general, but, you know, like when you really succeed at something, I don't know, sometimes your reaction is just to be like, yes. And for me, that just, like, my dad was such a football fan. You know, every Sunday and Monday football was on. So, like, that's the metaphor, or that's what I automatically also see in my head. Which I think they also kind of pulled upon, even if that was unspoken as well. So I think that this connection, or this binary between queer performance and sport, it just makes it so much more fun and so much more rebellious when you go into these spaces, or you're able to kind of reclaim these very negative memories, emotions, or feelings that you have, and reposition them, or attach new memories and feelings or embodiments to those memories and emotions, was something that was very powerful for me. I can't speak to my friends. I didn't interview any of them for this
All right.
piece. But for me, that's kind of some of the connections between sports and this kind of queer performance or queer spacing that was going on.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for talking to us. This was great, and this is again a lot more fun than just listening to me take up a reading among three other readings week after week after week. You know, as long as we're stuck online, right? So,
Well, thank you
um,
for having me. I mean, I'm always happy to talk Gaga.
right. Okay. Uh, well, okay. I'm just gonna make sure I save this properly. If I lose this, I will cry, and no one wants to see that, of course. If I
I
lose,
don't
you
know if I
can't
can
see
redo
anything.
it.
Right. How do I pause the recording? Stop recording.